Welcome back to part two of the P320 Uncommanded Discharge discussion. If you're coming from the article directly and you haven't read part one already, I highly recommend you do so. If you didn't know there was a technical breakdown or a written portion to go along with this, I highly recommend you check out the links in the description. Before we get started here, just as one of the three owners of Range Rival, majority owner, I wanted to address that we're going to be talking about some polarizing topics today as we open up in the P320 discussion with recent events with Alex Pretti and ICE in Minneapolis. So um, I totally accept that we might all come from different backgrounds. We might see the presence of ICE differently in Minneapolis. I'm going to try to avoid all that today and just kind of focus on the technical breakdown and how it relates to the P320 discussion. I do personally feel that Alex's death was unnecessary, but we'll kind of get into that. You'll hear some of my personal opinions as we go along, and then after we're done talking about Alex Pretti, we'll move on to more of the general and broader strokes of what's going on with the P320 here since the first article. So obviously, ICE is in Minneapolis. I think there's a growing tension is not the right word, as deaths are already happening and tension's probably not the right word. But I think things are escalating more and more. I think as we saw the Renee situation, and me feeling I was very personally heated about that, and it took me a very long time to come around to the fact that what the ICE officer did under all circumstances was lawful, albeit I don't think moral or practical. I imagine if that was me in his position, and I truly felt like I was about to be hit, I would be doing everything to get out of the way of that vehicle. But I also recognize that he had every right to defend his life under our current policy. And I think that policy protects officers in other situations more often than it does protect bad officers or bad situations, maybe is a better way to put it. Because it's not my place to say he was a bad officer, but hearing him say, fucking bitch, right, as after he shot her, like, really did not sit well with me. But I think it's important to acknowledge that as we jump into the situation with Alex here, as things are continuing to escalate. People in the community and from probably around the country are coming in to voice their opinions, and there are people that are antagonizing agents and getting in the way, and I recognize all this is happening. So if you think that I am just taking one side, I want to say it is chaotic out there. So with Alex Pretti, we can see in the video that we have posted here in the article, him approach an ICE officer, or not necessarily the officer, but the lady that the ICE officer was pushing down. And by all means, it looks like he was trying to help her get back up. And again, this is going to be one of the hard things that for all of us that feel like Alex Pretti was basically murdered, that he did technically commit assault when he touched the officer. You cannot put hands on an officer. There are very stringent rules. This is for all law enforcement. But in the same breath, I think there are higher standards that law enforcement are also held to, that this ICE officer or agent, however you want to say it, didn't exhibit. Because, for example, as soon as he, touched the officer, it was clearly to get him disengaged from the woman, and it wasn't to hurt him or, push him down or anything. There was no continued attack or attempt to get control over the officer himself outside of the one action that was being committed against the woman at that point. So immediately the ICE officer starts pepper spraying, and I think it's very clear and abundant that this is an act of either aggression or negligence in training, because anybody that's ever carried pepper spray or has used it or has taken any kind of class around it knows that what you have there is a delivering agent, and the more that you continue to sit there and soak and soak and soak and soak, you're preventing the actual release of those capsid. Oh my gosh, I'm not even trying to say the name of capsidinoids or whatever. That release and actually activate those pain receptors and actually start. So sitting there spraying does nothing. And you can see that within the first couple seconds, Alex was actually reacting, because he immediately, while he got stiff and he wasn't, I don't like to say listening to commands, because he was obviously clearly in a lot of pain from that first burst of the pepper spray. He was just rigid and not necessarily complying, but he was clearly not trying to attempt to hurt any officers as they dogpiled him to the ground. Um, And so once they got him to the ground, obviously they discovered his concealed carry. It was in his, we call it cartel carry. He was carrying it in the rear. So as he was bent over with this, hands forward, they were able to see his carry from behind. And you can see the agent in the gray hoodie come and reach over, grab and remove it real quick. Now, this is like where the huge point of contention is for me, because without this detail, I think the shooting is completely unjustified no matter what. But this is the one detail that can change it, is if that ICE officer, either by negligence, which is to me more probable, pulled the trigger and discharged Alex's gun, or if maybe this is a rare case of the uncommanded discharge, how that contributed to sequentially the following officers taking shots. We have a very grainy frame where we can see it looks like maybe the slide is locked back, but it is so hard to tell from the artifacting that it is just like pissing in the wind to say that is absolute proof of either side, whether it is or isn't locked back. One thing that I didn't really notice is a plume of smoke on the ground where you would maybe expect an impact on the concrete. But I think there's going to be more to come. I think the body cam footage, if there is any available of these agents, is going to be really important to figuring out what actually happened, because no matter what, it seems as if that first shot went off, and then the other, the two agents that fired the majority of the shots ended up, popping off after. So to me, there's a very small but still their chance that there was some kind of discharge that caused the officers to think they were being shot out. Now, I'll follow that up with saying that when you're a normal officer and you're engaging these type of situations, and that you've got the person bent over and maybe that their gun is inaccessible and you haven't seen them grab it and you can't see it and they're not aimed at you, and you hear a quote unquote shot in what is a chaotic environment, is it realistic to say that you can just shoot the first person you think might be doing it? Because again, by all accounts, Alex did not approach them with a gun. He did not reach for his gun when he was pepper sprayed. They found the gun after he tackled him to the ground. So that's where, like, I really, really have an issue. Alex as a person, by all accounts, it looks like Alex was like a beautiful human being. He was a nurse for the VA. He contributed a lot, it seems like, to both his community, and he had very strong opinions, which is why I think he was out there that day. And it's very hard for me to feel like somebody who maybe had the best intentions met this fate, because I don't think it's inappropriate that he was concealed carrying even to a protest. And we'll touch on protesting in 2026 here in a second, but I don't think it's inappropriate that he was concealed carrying his gun, because that's what the whole point of our right to bear arms is. That's why we get concealed carry licenses. All these different things. And I know Alex did not have his ID on him that day, but let's recognize what that is. That's a misdemeanor for not having your ID and having your gun with where he lives. So let's not pretend like his life should have been ended over it, or that they even knew that in the process of taking him to the ground. Protesting in 2026. I think some of the best changes in our history in our country have came from protesting and public displays of opinion and everything in between. It's with a heavy heart that I say that protesting in 2026 seems like it's not the same. And as everything evolves from communicating from, like, talking face to face, to mail, to text message, to the internet, instant messenger, I think there needs to be some kind of evolution in protesting, because it just opens up both sides to so much malice, hate, and very little progress. Because no matter what you're doing with your intentions when you go out there, there could be somebody out there with worse intentions than yourself, making it hard for anybody to tell where you sit in that. I remember the George Floyd protests going on in my city here in Fort Wayne. And by all means, I feel like we have a really, really good police department. I think there's, a lot of things to be said about systematic issues and, nationwide policies and things like that. And I think we should always be trying to get a better standard out of the people that watch over our neighborhoods. When I say I think that, law enforcement should have more funding. It's not more funding to continue doing more of what they're doing now. It's so that way you can have, the better training for maybe on the mat, or giving them a budget so that way they're more confident in their, firearm skills. So it's not such an adrenaline driven moment where maybe the wrong decisions are being made, even for the right reasons. So going back to the whole protesting in 2026 or 2026, yeah, when I was at the George Floyd protest, prior, I was documenting it with my camera. Again, we have a really good law enforcement, and even then, as it gets a little wild and people can't tell what is going on, deployment of tear gas, C2 canisters, or whatever start happening, and it doesn't even matter if you were participating or showing any kind of threat. It's go time. Everybody's getting cleared. I almost got hit directly with a canister. I know somebody who was protesting a little bit closer, actually got hit in the eye. And again, there's just too much chaos, and you're not getting your message across. And I wouldn't feel so strongly about this, I think, if I felt like people were going to the polls, not just every 4 years when it's presidential time, but when it's like every 2 years when it's local offices, town hall meetings. And, I'm not saying that I participate in this stuff actively either, but I have looked into it more. I'm trying to become more aware, because I think that's really what we need to do, is to make our voices heard, is go to those places in an official capacity and show that our numbers do matter, because it's often that I feel like there is a majority of voices that are not being heard because a minority might be a little bit louder. And I think if we're going to ever reach a symmetry of our two sides, we're going to have to start treating each other as equals, no matter how many of there are of this side, that side, whatever. And that's why I like to call myself a fence sitter, because I can get nauseous talking about politics from the left, I can get nauseous from the right, and I'm sure everybody gets nauseous listening to me talk, whether it be now or on my Facebook post with my friends. So I hope we can set all that aside as we can jump into some more of the technical stuff here. And I have the most prayers for Alex's family and everybody that is now at a loss because they don't have him in his life anymore. So moving on to more of the P320 specific stuff, the public response since our first article has been pretty heavy-handed. IDPA, one of the major competition shooting leagues, has banned it outright from the league. So if you're shooting IDPA matches, can't shoot P320. That's actually pretty insane if you think about it. We've seen spurts of individual ranges banning the 320 here and there, but that is mostly personal opinion. That's going to be at match director discretion. And a lot of people took, some caution ahead of time. That doesn't necessarily mean that there was something that should be looked at more, but IDPA banning it completely was a huge, huge deal. And I'd be interested if USPSA would do the same thing if they weren't so heavily sponsored by SIG. But that's a whole other thing. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with what's going on there. SIG sponsoring USPSA and practice score and all this other stuff. Like, that's just nature of the game. Instructors banning them from classes is kind of interesting, because you saw initially that instructors were like, well, I think everybody can have their opinion, and it's up to personal preference, but banning a gun kind of sets a bad precedence too, because you're almost interjecting your opinion into if there is an issue or not. And that's slowly changed to, okay, we're just not going to run this gun in my classes. I have a backup gun if you want to use it until you're able to get another one or whatever. And I've seen that take over predominantly in our area specifically. The big thing, the Washington CJTC releasing their kind of report on it. Again, this is all data that needs to be looked at. Why these major organizations are seeing maybe a problem when they introduce these guns into a higher number. And we'll kind of address that in our conclusion on why I think it's good to go through these details, because my main assertion isn't that this is a issue with every single P320 or even a large quantity of them. Regardless of the reality of the problem, the possibility of the problem is what kind of matters. Because if you guys have ever talked to these ranges about insurance or liability, it's very hard to get approval to do certain things. Like even local matches like USPSA and PCSL are often held back by members of clubs that see that as kind of a liability to their ability to even run their club. Because what happens when somebody sends a round off into town, or shoots somebody on the range, or shoots himself? What's that going to look like for their ability to continue that club or that range? So imagine if you just have this piece of equipment that has like this 1 out of a million chances of like ruining your ability to have something like that. Insurance agencies don't mess around, and so I think that's why you're seeing more people take action, not because they have found anything specific.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
So I think it's notable for two reasons on both sides. I think it's notable because there seems to be a concern enough that people are taking action, but it's also not proof of that action, if that makes sense.
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
So it's like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're not careful. And I just want to be able to differentiate the two. All right, let's take a look at the government and military. As mentioned up above, the executive branch issues the P320 not only to its agents, but to our military members, from the Air Force to the Army and whatnot. It won the military contract, the modular handgun systems contract or whatever, all the way back before we were talking about any of this stuff. And that's how it became popular to begin with. So the major things to look at since the first article there is the Air Force Global Strike Command pausing it completely. Again, we're going to compare this to the previous one, previous examples we just gave. It's a pretty big deal when Air Force Global Strike Command pauses a handgun, whatever. They want to take a look at it, reissue, and then, or they want to issue whatever sidearms temporarily and then reissue these after the investigation if they feel everything's good. Pretty big deal that they're pulling handguns to do that. Now the reason why they did this is because an airman died at the other end of his P320. And at first it seemed as if there was a accidental or uncommanded discharge, and people were speculating maybe this is one of the 6 incidents that people were starting to call, and you saw memes all week. And I thought it was very interesting, and I almost wanted to make a video at that point, but I've kind of learned from all these situations, wait a little bit, see what actually happens. And again, this was one of those situations where somebody lied. And as much as people don't want to address that, people do lie about, negligent discharges. It's the nature of it. People are embarrassed. They don't want the liability. They don't want to believe that they, maybe did it. There's so many reasons. And in this case, it was because somebody died, and he convinced 2 other airmen to lie on his behalf for him, even though he was the one fumbling with the gun and, shot the other airmen. So it's a very unfortunate circumstance. I think it should be recognized as one of those incidents that, Sig maybe definitely got the wrong hand or, wrong side of the deal on that one. But I think it might be for how they've handled the situation previously, which is what we're going to kind of get to at the end here. Before we get into that, though, the FBI report seemed like it was kind of a smoking gun that was coming out. There was a redacted version that was released and then picked up again on a training bulletin that saw, the potential for a design flaw that over time could produce maybe an uncommanded discharge or a discharge without pulling the trigger. Now, this report did not find anything conclusive, and again, they did some they did some tinkering with this gun or whatever to be able to do this testing. So they never got to a conclusive result. But a lot of people saw that as, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. Sig, on the other hand, came out and said the exact opposite. Hey, look, they weren't able to conclusively find anything. Of course, there's no issue. And that's what's kind of really annoying about that whole deal, is that I wish there was some conclusive, absolute details that we could sit there, address, comb through, and be able to say yay or nay. Because this is a difficult topic, a difficult issue, and I think it's very polarizing in the gun world. For example, I have friends that shoot P320s. I think I'm probably an absolute nut. I have relationships probably in the firearm world I'm not going to ever get to experience because of, my opinions here on the P320. And I think that's a great segue into talking about Mr. Bruce Gray here, because I know somebody locally that shoots Bruce's custom guns and has had personal interactions with him, and by all accounts says that Bruce is a really great human being to be around and have conversations with and engage with. And what he does in his personal life seems to be, pretty on the up and up in terms of like he's a pretty good dude in his personal life, and somebody that I would probably be able to have a beer with, even with the disagreements that we have going here, or maybe disagreements is the wrong word, but maybe me being a little needly towards him, because if I was in his position, I probably wouldn't appreciate some of the questions I'm asking. If there isn't a good answer for him, or even if there is a good answer for him, or how dare I even imply or question his credibility on certain things. So totally understand from his perspective why that beer is probably never going to happen. But I just want to address it before I even talk about my interaction with Bruce Gray on his personal Facebook here, that we need to consider that people are people too, and that the polarizing opinions can make you forget that, I think, sometimes. So let's get into what the actual incident was. So the Rumble series was posted about the P320 controversy that Bruce had made.
English, motherfucker, do you speak it?
Let's back up here. Bruce had made a Rumble series about the P320, basically going through all the things people have talked about, what mechanical failures, why they can't happen, and what kind of what's happened under this accusation of basically defamatory behavior, I think is how he phrased it. He said basically people that were defaming him, and how those stories in the news cycle kind of perpetuate on each other, and so that's why you're noticing it more, not because that there's more incidents, but because the news is just grabbing onto it now as a story. I could probably engage with a lot of that content a little bit easier, but I still need the answer to my original question, which I did ask him, in this comment section, was how are we to take anything that he has at face value when he was creating a patent in 2017 that by all accounts looks like it makes the P320 a safer handgun, and then transfer that to Sig at the same time that he said that the P320 was 100% safe and could not be fired for any reason other than a trigger pull. I think it's without a doubt early on that we can say there was some kind of drop safety issue. I don't think we ever got to the bottom of, again, because this is such a shroud of confusion. You don't really see those types of issues necessarily as much as you're seeing some of these like random discharges, or interfacing with a holster or something else. Like it's not the same kind of discharge you were seeing before, where somebody was dropping it and just at the right angle it was popping it off, like Omaha Outdoors. So it's very hard for me to separate the two, because I don't know whether or not there was an issue before, there's an issue now, if the issue before is just kind of leaking out progressively over time, or if there's maybe just a bad design, as like what we kind of talked about in the original article. If you went and read the first article, we talked a little bit about the history of the P320, and how basically it's just a striker fire ripoff of the P250. While that's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think the purpose of the design was necessarily considered, and what you ended up with, again, is a very flexible firing control unit. So I think by all accounts, these questions need to be answered, and I feel very offended when I'm asking Bruce these things and his response is, well, did you even watch the videos? And it's like, well, yes, I watched the videos. I'm one of like 80 people at the time that had watched the videos. I think it might have like 400 or 500 views now on it. We're going to link it again in the article in the description here. But I did watch the videos, and it didn't talk anything about your patent that you made in 2017 that I'm also going to link in the article and description here. And I mean, that's kind of the question, is because I can't take anything else you've said after that at face value if I know you've lied about something else, because there's something that smells here. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I really am. But that's just something that's not sat right with me. And this is why I tell people that, you know, with everything that's going on, you know, Sig has made legendary handguns, and they will probably continue to do so. But with everything going on, why do you have to have a Sig P320 when other options exist? You know, competition, everyday carry. And it doesn't have to be a Glock. That's just what I went back to. I had Glocks before. I really liked them. I got SIGs because I liked the way they look and they felt better in my hands. And honestly, I shot them better. But I cannot feel comfortable carrying something like that around or telling other people that they should with what I'm trying to do with this brand, or with what I'm trying to do with new shooters, especially with things that are maybe more prone to being, you know, safety issues. So I'm more than comfortable learning to shoot this better, you know, with a worse trigger, or maybe you know, a different design because it's not a pre-cocked striker, or getting any kind of different brands and just trying different things. I'm more comfortable having different options than I am laying my sword down to die on the P320 hill to eventually, maybe potentially, you know. So I don't think I have much more to say on this. If you guys want to add your opinions or comment, you can do it on the article. You can join our Discord. I welcome all opinions, all backgrounds. I just ask that you keep it cordial. You can change my mind. I'm looking for definitive proof. I'm not trying to say I'm trying to find definitive proof that, hey, this is the issue. I just need to know, like, what's going on here. And I think everybody else wants to know the same. So we'll continue to track this. We probably won't make a part 3 unless something crazy changes or happens. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. I think we've talked about everything that I can offer with my current level of expertise as a shitty B-class bandit. So good luck, everyone.
Well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns, but there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
What?